Hello, my name is Mike Earl, and this is the second video in my series on what I'm calling the outside first hypothesis. If you watched my first video, you'll recall that the outside first hypothesis is a proposition about the way human beings interpret visual experience. Specifically, it's the proposition that human beings will believe that what they see is located outside of their heads before they will believe it is located inside of their heads. And this is the case for all human beings, regardless of time or place. All people will believe outside first. That's the outside first hypothesis. Now, for our purposes, the outside first hypothesis is going to function as the first premise in an argument. This argument is designed to justify a particular philosophical system. The details of this system will unfold as we go along. Now, in my previous video, I introduced the first four premises of this argument. Let's quickly review the argument so far. The first premise is the outside first hypothesis. All people will believe that what they see is located outside of their heads before they will believe it's located inside. We're going to assume this is true for the sake of argument. The second premise says that the outside scenario and the inside scenario are mutually exclusive ways of understanding the same visual experience. Now, the idea here is that both scenarios can't be right. It's like a coin flip. Whichever scenario is right, the other is wrong, and completely wrong. The third premise says that the outside scenario is wrong and the inside scenario is right. This is basically what the science tells us. The fourth premise says that the outside scenario is initially experienced as a transparent assumption. Now, by this I mean that we begin our lives believing that what we see is located outside of our heads, and we believe this for the simple reason that it just seems that way. And initially, it doesn't even occur to us that things could be otherwise. It's only later in life, if ever, that we confront information and/or evidence that would compel us to think that the outside scenario might be wrong. But initially, we are blissfully unaware of this possibility. And that's what I mean by transparent assumption. So that's the argument so far. The outside first hypothesis is true, the outside and inside scenarios are mutually exclusive, the outside scenario is wrong, the inside is right, and the outside scenario is initially experienced as a transparent assumption. These are the first four premises of our argument, and there's more to come. But notice that from just these four premises alone, we can draw a fairly radical conclusion. For if these four premises are true, it follows that all of us, without exception, begin our journeys through life with a categorically false belief about the nature of our most dominant physical sense, which is visual experience. And initially, we are completely unaware of this mistake. Now, as radical as this conclusion may be, in this video, we're going to confront an even more radical conclusion. And that's because the mistake we make, the mistake all of us make, is about far more than just visual experience. In this video, we're going to take a first look at this larger mistake. To get us started, I want to introduce a diagram that will play an important role in our discussion going forward. We start with a circle. Let this circle represent the world. And by the world, I don't just mean the planet we call Earth. By the world, I mean the totality of all that exists. Everything. The world is everything. And that's what this circle represents. Let's add another circle, a smaller circle. This smaller circle is a subset of the big circle, meaning it's a subset of the world. Let this smaller circle represent me. So I am a subset of the world. Or more generally, a human being is a subset of the world. What we're going to do next is consider the outside first hypothesis within the context of this diagram. Before we do that, however, I want to point out that there are two ways we can think about this diagram, both of which will be relevant to our discussion. First of all, we can think of the diagram as a Venn diagram. It illustrates the logical relationship between myself and the larger world. For if I define the world as everything, which I have, then it follows that if I am anything at all, I must necessarily be a subset of the world. The relationship between myself and the world as that of a part to the whole is logically inescapable. And I think our diagram conveys this relationship. A second way we can think about this diagram is in spatial terms. The world, being everything, occupies all of space. I, on the other hand, being a subset of the world, occupy only a small part of space. Now, our diagram is not drawn to scale, of course, but it allows us to speak meaningfully of the relative locations of things, such as something being located inside of me as opposed to outside of me. So we can think about this diagram in two ways, as representing the logical relationship between me and the world, but also the spatial relationship between me and the world. This one diagram works in both cases. I now want to consider the outside first hypothesis within the context of this diagram. Now, the outside first hypothesis is concerned with two scenarios. What I see is located outside of my head, and what I see is located inside my head. To help us think about these two scenarios within the context of our diagram, let the location of what I see be represented with an X. When I do this, the outside scenario looks like this. The inside scenario looks like this. Outside scenario, inside scenario. Outside, inside. You get the idea. Now, what I would ask you to notice here is that when viewed within the context of our diagram, the what I see is located outside of my head scenario becomes the what I see is the world scenario. And the what I see is located inside my head scenario becomes the what I see is me scenario. Remember, the outside scenario is motivated by the way things seem. So it seems that what I see is outside my head. But it also seems that what I see is the world. And when I say I see the world, I mean I see the actual world, the thing itself, outside my head. That's how things seem. The inside scenario, on the other hand, is motivated by science. The science says that what I see is the activity of my eyeballs and brain, which are inside my head. So what I see is inside my head. But my eyeballs and brain are part of me. Therefore, according to the science, what I see is me. The takeaway point is this. To say that what I see is located outside of my head is equivalent to saying that what I see is the world. And to say that what I see is located inside my head is equivalent to saying that what I see is me. This agrees with our motivations, and it agrees with our diagram. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because our argument says that the outside scenario is wrong, which now means that the what I see is the world scenario is wrong. Perhaps you can see where this is going. If I believe that what I see is located outside of my head, then I'm going to be mistaken about what I think the world is and about what I think I am. I'm going to be mistaken about the world because I'll think that what I see is the world when it's not. And I'll be mistaken about me because I'll think that what I see is not me when it is. The bottom line is this. If I believe that what I see is located outside of my head, I am going to be mistaken about a whole lot more than just visual experience. I'm going to be mistaken about what the world is and about what I am. And if our argument is correct, I'm categorically mistaken. Remember, the outside and inside scenarios are mutually exclusive. So I'm not just a little bit mistaken here, I'm totally mistaken. And herein lies the real significance of the outside first hypothesis. Because the outside first hypothesis says that all of us believe the outside scenario first, which now means that all of us, without exception, begin our journeys through life with categorically false beliefs about the world and about ourselves. And initially, we're completely unaware of this mistake. Now, this is a radical proposition. Should you believe this? At no point in our discussion will I ask you to believe any of this. I'm not sure if I believe it myself. But there's an argument here, and I think it's an interesting argument. And if it's true, then it's a tremendously important argument because its implications are so vast. In the next video, I'll continue to develop this argument, and we'll begin to consider its implications not just for individuals, but for the human species as a whole. Until then, thank you for watching.